Hello again, everyone. It's great seeing you again. I'm Dave Percy, a meteorologist with the National Weather Service, and welcoming you to Sunday's edition of Alaska Weather. And up first on the hazardous weather graphic, we've got heavy snow warning continues here for the northern Panhandle, Juneau, Northern Admiralty Island, Taya Inlet, Klondike Highway, the Glacier Bay area, including Gustavus, looking for possibly another 3 to 6 inches of snow until this evening. Winter storm warning ends at midnight for the heavy snow, so could pick up some more snow with anywhere from 5 to 10 inches has fallen in some areas here during the day today. And then out toward the coastline there, winter weather advisory looking for 1 to 3 inches of additional snow. And again, that's during the evening, as that advisory ends the same time as the warning at midnight tonight. Otherwise, no other watches, warnings, or advisories around the state up to the north, looking good, and also no big storms. In fact, high pressure kind of taking over the Aleutian Island pattern here, and to a lesser extent the Bering Sea for the next couple of days. This is a picture of the Shisalden volcano at about noon today. And you can see the steam and ash cloud here coming out of the volcano and then kind of tracking off to the east there, and then a little bit to the southeast. It begins to dissipate and picked up a little bit of activity overnight, or it increased, and I guess the plume became more ash than steam overnight last night. And you can see tracking pretty close there to False Pass, the outer edge though. Heights anywhere from 20 to 31,000 feet there. With that, and action will continue until, I guess, further notice. Otherwise, looking at satellite imagery today, we've got low pressure here spinning in the eastern Gulf of Alaska, kind of pulling back to the northwest here, and that pulling gusty east-southeast winds and across the Panhandle with milder temperatures, rain falling this afternoon near 40 at Sitka, and then the snow over the northern areas there. And also over toward Hyder and Stewart. Moisture of this feature not quite reaching the area yet, although kind of a varied precipitation amount total here over the southern Panhandle. Some areas having about 9/10 of an inch in the more mountainous terrain, other areas less. AKwx had about 1,500 by comparison. Otherwise, Sitka east-southeast gusting 35 miles an hour. And that pattern extending up along the North Gulf Coast as several bands of moisture track northwest-northwestward. Cordova had a brief period of moderate to heavy snow late morning around midday today, and then those east winds hit up 30, 35 miles an hour from the east-southeast. Temperature pushing up toward 40 degrees, so that changed the precipitation over to rain, also letting up as well. But Valdez picking up some moderate to heavy snow at mid-afternoon today. And not quite getting as far west as I thought it might have yesterday, or I thought it might reach into at least the east end of the Turnagain Arm area. Otherwise, kind of a narrow band of clouds and some light snow showers dissipating here along the southwest coast of the Alaska Peninsula there. Nothing going on up over the North Slope and Arctic coast, and some light snow here through the Bering Strait. Extending southward, isolated snow showers into the Pribilofs, kind of a weak disturbance here, and not too bad over the Aleutians, from actually the Alaska Peninsula, aside from the volcanic activity there. Out to the west, pretty good, a little bit of an increase in snow showers out toward Shimia though, but nothing serious. And rolling this through again, you can see the cold air dropping southeastward, and then taking a turn to the east here over the western Bering Sea, coming out of the Russian Far East. A little bit more in the way of snow showers out toward Shimia, clearing out, or ending, there for Adak and Atka. And you can see dry conditions still well below zero up over the north central and northeast interior today. especially along the Yukon Flats, with some cloudiness beginning to encroach into the eastern interior around Eagle, back down in toward the Alaska Range. Winds pretty gusty. Delta Junction seeing winds gusting 30, 35 miles an hour at times. Temperature 7 degrees below zero. So that put a little sting into that wind. Otherwise, high pressure holding here, but not all that strong. These values really not that high for Arctic high pressure, but it is holding dry conditions, really more of a lack of storminess and a presence of high pressure, but it is still there. Weak low in the Gulf and the precipitation associated with that. Isolated snow showers here continue to diminish. A little bit more extensive, a couple of weak troughs here in the Bering Sea, but high pressure out to the west. For tonight, still a weak trough there across St. Lawrence Island. Periods of light snow continuing there. Areas of fog and lower flying conditions right down along a narrow band of IFR probably with us, coming right down along the southwest coast, Nunivak Island. And then that just a weak trailing edge there coming into the Alaska Peninsula. Chance of light snow showers, perbolofts, winds light. And then another low here farther back to the west, another trough with that may kick the snow showers up over the perbolofts late tonight into early tomorrow. But you can see the illusions here looking pretty good. Just about no gradient, basically a ridge of high, weak high pressure across the area. So look for some clearing, light winds, dry conditions. And that'll hold into tomorrow as well, here with this storm and the precipitation, along with the wind field staying to the south of the chain. Maybe a few snow flurries grazing the north shores of Unamak and Unalaska Islands, possibly. Better chance for the perbolofts there. In closer to low center, it's slowly tracking eastward. Westerly flow aloft coming across the Bering Sea. That's going to continue to push weak surges of snow showers into the southwest coast. Togiak Bay, northwest up to St. Lawrence Island and the Bering Strait, western Seward Peninsula. But again, no significant amounts associated with this. And high pressure holding barely there. Kind of a weak center up over the eastern Brooks Range, but still dry. Temperatures below zero through the day tomorrow, but not quite as far. And then dry conditions and mostly clear skies extending southward, Kuskokwim Valley down into the Bristol Bay area, northeast Bristol Bay, Alaska Peninsula. Kodiak Island clearing out, kind of weak northwest flow there. But south central Alaska, mostly cloudy, areas of light snow. Best chance western Susitna Valley up toward the eastern slopes of the western Alaska Range. North Gulf Coast light snow into the northern Panhandle, tapering off down to the south. Outlook for Monday. Very weak low here, keeps the risk of some rain or snow showers over the Panhandle, but not much at all. And maybe some partly sunny skies in the central Panhandle. Kind of increasing clouds, some moisture. Looks like it'll just barely reach the extreme southern southeast coast if it does at all, there to the south. And still this trough pattern in the west, along the west coast for mostly cloudy skies. Flurries, light snow showers all the way up, a little more widespread, but light for the northwest coast. High pressure, southern Bering Sea and the Aleutians, nice conditions there. Low temperatures tonight, 35 to 45 below at the coldest here over the northeast interior, about 20 below Copper River Basin, in the teens south of the Alaska Range. Mid-20s Kodiak Island, lower 20s of perbolofts, in the 20s for the Aleutians, and kind of a range here anywhere from low 20s northern Panhandle to mid-30s out along the central and south coast. Highs tomorrow near 40 on the central southern Panhandle, near 30 up toward Skagway, and in the 20s south central Alaska. In some cases even the upper 20s, but still below zero north of the Alaska Range. Lows the following morning milder, but still maybe down toward 40 below in the Yukon Flats, followed by a little milder highs.
And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Moving on to flying weather for Monday morning here, we've got some IFR Bristol Bay down across the Alaska Peninsula. Some VFR out here over the central Bering Sea to the Aleutians, and marginal VFR mostly there, northern Bering Sea through the Strait, south coast of the Seward Peninsula. Mostly VFR in the interior, some IFR upper Yukon Valley or in the flats there, kind of along the Porcupine River Valley, and some IFR on the east central Arctic coast. Band of extensive IFR here up Prince William Sound eastward into Elfin Cove and then down along the coastline of the Panhandle. Marginal VFR inland and IFR actually all the way over to the border down south. For the afternoon, that increases here across the southeast coast. Basically IFR across the entire area, and a narrow band of IFR along the North Gulf Coast into the Coast Range there, and a little bit less, but still persisting across northern and western Prince William Sound. Also some IFR here from roughly Cook Inlet, northern Cook Inlet, up into the Susitna Valley, especially the west side there, on up to the southern slopes of the Alaska Range, possibly. Otherwise, pretty good to the north, and some marginal VFR with isolated IFR here along the west coast. Bering Sea, marginal VFR at worst, with areas of VFR along the Aleutians, especially the Fox Islands, Alaska Peninsula, and Nunivak Island, St. Lawrence Island look to be VFR tomorrow afternoon. And then for Tuesday morning, that continues throughout the night tomorrow night, and pretty widespread marginal VFR, but no IFR out over the Bering Sea, Aleutians included. South side of the Alaska Peninsula, IFR on up toward Trinity Islands there. Kodiak kind of right on the edge, south IFR possible. Just to the north, VFR into southern Cook Inlet. Some IFR still here over the Susitna Valley on up toward the south slopes of the Alaska Range, narrow band along the North Gulf Coast Range, and then into the northern Panhandle, but a little bit less than tomorrow afternoon, and then VFR down south. And the outlook for Tuesday, kind of marginal in the central Panhandle, Prince of Wales Island to Hyder, Stewart, IFR, Lynn Canal Glacier Bay down to Sitka, IFR, over to Yakutat, IFR, then bringing out to VFR, maybe Cordova, more likely Valdez, Kenai Peninsula, VFR, Cook Inlet, same forecast. Marginal to IFR there, Kodiak Island, and looks like VFR scattered around the interior along with marginal VFR scattered around, and IFR as well scattered in the areas of marginal VFR. And the Yukon Delta, lower Yukon River Valley looking pretty good, mostly VFR there. North Slope mostly VFR, Arctic Coast VFR. And the Bering Sea, again, mostly marginal with very little, if any, in the way of IFR conditions. St. Lawrence Island in the VFR zone, on down across the Yukon Delta and a portion of the Kuskokwim Delta. And for passes, Anaktuvik and Adigan, another VFR day coming up for you tomorrow. Adigan, move on. Lake Clark, VFR, Merrill, kind of cutting it in two here, becoming marginal in the afternoon. That moisture sliding northwestward, even rainy will be more in the area there. Starting out VFR, though, becoming IFR late in the afternoon. Windy, VFR, south entrance becoming marginal possibly in the afternoon. And for Isabel VFR, Mentasta VFR. And in case of Isabel, see an increase in the clouds, but I think it'll stay VFR through the afternoon. And for Tanita VFR, same forecast here, increasing clouds. I think it'll stay VFR through the afternoon. And Portage, though, IFR and Chilkoot and White starting out pretty good and then becoming marginal. Freezing levels, 2,000 feet over the southeast coast. At the surface here, kind of hugging the coastline just north of the eastern Aleutians. Icing, not too much, scattered areas of maybe mixed, but not too significant out here in the west. A little bit more pronounced band here with that weakening frontal boundary. Could be some areas of considerable moderate rime icing. Jet stream, main jet still well to the south. Got westerlies across the Bering Sea here at about 110 knots, and it splits as it approaches the Bristol Bay area. And 9,000 feet southwest becomes south, 15 to 25 knots here. Light over the eastern central Aleutians, southwest 20-25 into the Panhandle, same thing at 9,000 or 3,000 feet. And turbulence, an area of light to isolated moderate chop here for North Gulf Coast to the north coast of the Panhandle.
Welcome back to another edition of Alaska Weather Facts. I'm meteorologist Dave Snider. As you well know, you can get forecast information for any day of the week. Today, tonight, tomorrow, out to 6 or 7 days. It includes the high and low temperature, the wind direction, the chance of rain or snow in your part of Alaska. But did you know that there is information available to forecast out to 2 weeks? So the question is, how would you use that information? And here to answer that question today and tell us a lot more about climate services from the U.S. National Weather Service Alaska region is Rick Toman. He's the program manager for the Climate Science and Services. And Rick, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Dave.
How would we use information that is out to 2 weeks instead of just the high and low and the chance of rain?
Well, Dave, as we move out in time, of course, forecasts become more uncertain. So as we move into that second week from now, we're not looking at specific highs or lows or precipitation amounts at any given place. What we can do with the state of the science at this point is get a handle on patterns. So we can say things like increased chances for stormy weather in the Bering Sea in 2 weeks, or we've been in a cold weather pattern, looks like 8 to 10 days from now, that pattern's going to change. Those are the kind of forecasts that we can currently make in that second week.
So you're increasing lead time for perhaps big or small weather events and telling us the likelihood of maybe more coastal storms or wind events in some areas?
Those are the kinds of things that that we hope to be able to let Alaskans know in the second week forecast. And if you have an activity or an event that you would find that kind of advance notice useful, whether it's moving stuff off of the beach, whether to go out hunting or to come back from camp, those kind of decisions, the week 2 provides the opportunity for you to get a handle on that kind of information.
Okay. What other type of weather impacts that we're familiar with might Alaskans use climate services for?
Well, in the forecast realm, we can go provide some information from this week 2, say the 8 to 14 day period, on out to the monthly and even seasonal time scale. Now, those monthly seasonal forecasts are still kind of just really very much pattern dependent, and the amount of detail that we can provide at this point is still pretty limited. Generally, indications of how temperature and precipitation will fall in maybe above normal, below normal kind of range. But in the week 2 period, we can be considerably more specific than that as far as the general patterns and really the impacts on Alaskans.
Okay, so we would be talking about generalizations there that would tell us that the period might be more stormy, might be more hot, more dry, more cold, and situations like that.
That's correct. So we're not going to be able to say in which community, for instance, there's the threat of coastal flooding, but we can often be able to tell we're moving into a pattern that would be conducive to big Bering Sea storms. So if you're in an area that could potentially impact you, you'll want to pay attention to the weather forecast.
Okay. Now, every day and every hour of the day, the National Weather Service is working on a forecast for the next day. But how do you start your forecast process for that extended period that goes out beyond 7 days?
Well, the way things work right now, we start off with the expected general flow pattern for Alaska and the whole world, really, and then we narrow that down to Alaska. So we start off with the basic computer model forecast. There's quite a few different computer models that we look at, bring those together. And then another important part of that is we attempt to assess the confidence. The reality is often 2 weeks away, the computer models are very divergent. They have lots of different solutions, and that's an indication that we don't have much confidence. But when we see more agreement in that time frame, and when that agreement is a pattern that will be potentially very impactful for Alaska or is a big change from what we've been in, that's when we can then take that expected pattern. We have computer models forecasting it. We've assessed the confidence. Now we can move that forward. How, using our experience as Alaskan weather forecasters, how does that typically play out for Alaska? So is this a stormy pattern for the Bering Sea? Is this an extra rainy period for Southeast? Is this the kind of pattern that generates strong winds potentially in the Anchorage Bowl? Is this a deep cold pattern for the interior? All of those are the kind of things that we're looking at in these large-scale patterns. That's very different than telling you that the winds on 10 days from now are going to be gusting to 120 on the hillside. We're looking for patterns, not the very specific information that the Weather Service will then hone in on as the event gets closer.
So the idea is to keep the 5, 6, 7 day forecast the same, where you are getting the standard high and low temperature and the chance of wind or rain, but further out you get a broad general forecast, but as the time gets closer to that event, we'll get a lot more specific.
That's correct.
Okay, very good. So how can people use this information if I am out in the bush and I want to see, is a coastal storm expected in my region, or is a chance for that improving over the next 2 to 3 weeks, where could I go to get information like that?
When we see that potentially impactful or a big change in the weather is coming 8 to 14 days out, typically we will start to highlight that on the Weather Service Facebook site. We might produce a YouTube video highlighting that, linking that on our Facebook site. So often we don't, at this point, we don't have much to say in that because we're really looking for those forecasts of opportunities. But one thing we can say very likely as we go through the next 2 or 3 years, there'll be more and more of this kind of forecast information available in that week 2 time frame.
Okay, and something that emergency managers and city planners and folks in villages might be interested in keeping an eye out for, looking for that information to be headlined, whether that's on social media or perhaps through the National Weather Service channels there to get information from you to make better plans a little bit longer term and make better preparations in the event that things become a little bit more unsettled.
Absolutely. Climate Services with the National Weather Service Alaska region is talking to the state of Alaska every week, apprising them of that 2-week outlook. And on the social media side, we are working to keep Alaskans informed so that when we think we have some confidence in a high impact or a big change, that's the best way right now for folks to find out about that. Twitter, Facebook, so stay tuned to your National Weather Service.
Very good, a developing program. Rick Thoman with the National Weather Service Alaska region. He's a Climate Science and Services Program Manager. Thanks so much for joining us again, Rick, and I hope to have you back again soon.
Great, thanks Dave.
For another edition of Alaska Weather Facts, I'm meteorologist Dave Snider. We'll see you next time.
And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome back. Today's sea ice analysis. A little bit of growth off to the south and southwest today, and it looks like it'll continue to grow and expand at the same rate and direction here for the next several days. So moving on to the coastal water forecast, there they are. For the southern coast here, southeast winds 15 to 20 knots, seas 12 to 13 feet. North coast, south winds at 20 knots, seas at about 12 feet. Lynn Canal north at 20 tomorrow with 4-foot seas. Switch the direction around the southeast here for the central southern inside waters, 15 knots and 3-foot seas or so. And then for Tuesday, northwest 15 Clarence Strait, northeast 15 for Stevens Passage, Lynn Canal, Glacier Bay, northern inside waters, north 15, 3-foot seas. North to northeast, 10 to 15 knots, pretty light in the central and south coast. North coast kind of varying here from east at 15 knots to west at 10. And for Prince William Sound, east winds 20 knots, seas 4 feet. South at 20 for the eastern North Gulf Coast with 9-foot seas. Those turn southwest as you head over to the western side of the zone there at 20 knots, and then northwest 25, small craft advisories for the Barren Islands, and then west at 20 for Kamishak Bay. Cook Inlet, northeast 10 knots with seas south of the Forelands at 3 feet. North at 10 knots for Cook Inlet, so not much change, but that'll extend down across Kamishak Bay, the Barren Islands, all north winds 10 knots, seas here up to 5 feet for the Barren Islands, 3 feet southern Cook Inlet, Kamishak Bay. And then variable winds at 10 for the North Gulf Coast. Pretty good wind pattern coming up if you like light winds with 6-foot seas. Prince William Sound variable to south at 10 knots with seas pretty slight. Kodiak Island west 15 knots tomorrow. Seas 4 to 7 feet. Bristol Bay north at 10. The Alaska Peninsula north to northwest 10 to 15 knots, 7 to 8-foot seas. And for Tuesday, Kodiak Island northeast 10 knots. Seas 2 to 5 feet, northeasterlies at 10 also for Bristol Bay, and on down here to Castle Cape. Then we got northeast 25 from Castle Cape to Cape Sarachev on the Pacific side of the peninsula with 5-foot seas, but the Bering Sea side north at 15. Fox Islands, kind of a variable wind direction here. West at 10 on the north side of Umak Island to east at 20 on the Pacific side, and north to northwest 15 knots for Unalaska Island, Adak and Atka, central Aleutians northeast 20 to 25 knots, seas 6 to 8 feet, and northeast 25 to about Amchitka or Kiska, and then it become north at 20 on out to Shemya at 2. For Tuesday, south 15 knots there from Shemya to Kiska, then northeast 20 from Kiska to in toward Adak, and then east to northeast 20 to 30 knots. Strongest winds will be south of Atka at 30 knots, and northeast 25 to 30 knot winds here, or 20 to 30 knot winds for the eastern Aleutians, seas running 8 to 15 feet. And for the southwest coast, light southwest breeze, 10 to 15 knots, strongest south of Nunivak Island, seas up to 4 feet. Southwest 20 for the Pribilofs, 15 knot southeast winds with 10-foot seas for the northern Bering Sea. And brisk wind advisory, St. Lawrence Island, southerlies 25 knots, Norton Sound east at 20. And then east winds 15 knots, Norton Sound, St. Lawrence Island, swinging around to the west at 15 knots into the Yukon Delta coastline there, north of Nunivak Island. Southwest 15, Kuskokwim Delta coast, and Pribilofs northwest 20, and small craft advisory, St. Matthew Island, northwest 25. Eastern Beaufort Sea coast, 10 to 15 knot southerly winds tomorrow, and central and west side, easterlies at 15. And Cape Beaufort to Cape Thompson, southeast 20, and then brisk wind advisories here from Cape Beaufort or Cape Thompson to Wales as those southeast winds kick up to 25 knots. They'll fall back to about 10 knots on Tuesday here, and then east winds 15 on the western Arctic coast, and then the central and eastern coast, a little bit of an increase, all east at 20 knots. Tonight, fair and cold, again, 35 to 45 below at the coldest here over the Yukon Flats. Otherwise, a little bit milder in most areas, especially down here where the clouds and light snow increases. Prince William Sound, maybe southern Copper River Basin. Stays damp, but nothing too significant. Winter storm warning ends for heavy snow Juneau on up to the Klondike Highway by midnight. And then the outlook for tomorrow, chance of snow showers along the west coast, northern Bering Sea, fair in the Aleutians, and still some lingering snow chances south central Alaska on Tuesday.
These forecasts are for planning purposes only. Call 1-800-WX-BRIEF for a formal pre-flight briefing. Always file a flight plan before you go flying. The U.S. Coast Guard Auxiliary urges you to leave a float plan with a friend or the harbor master before you go boating.